by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love.
Last week, Gloria spoke about going away on a journey and some of the problems that we can encounter on those things. But you know, however good it is to be away on holiday, there is always something special about coming home again. It is one thing when one's been away for just a few days, or perhaps a week. But how does it feel when one's been away for very much longer? A reading from the New Testament, Matthew chapter 2 and verse 19. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel. For those who are trying to take the child's life are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. And so was fulfilled what was said through the prophets: "He will be called a Nazarene." From our reading about Joseph, Mary and the baby Jesus, we learn that they've been in Egypt and that there is now a new ruler back in Bethlehem in Judea. The new ruler is Archelaus, Herod's son. He ruled from about 4 BC to 6 AD. Now, if Herod was bad, Archelaus even managed to be deposed by Rome because of his unpopularity with the Jews. They feared he would provoke an uprising. That might even have a bit of a contemporary ring to us, mightn't it? When Joseph brought his family back to Judea, following God's directions in the dream, he did not go to Bethlehem, but on to Nazareth in the north, which was outside Archelaus' control. It was a safe thing to do. Matthew is keen to emphasize this part of the story of the young Jesus' life, because he wants to see it all as being part of the fulfillment of Scripture that had prophesied he will be called a Nazarene. Now, whether this refers to the place or to the lifestyle, or the point that in his day people from Nazareth were generally despised and rejected, is another matter. We'll leave others to debate that. With Jesus back in Nazareth, Matthew ends his account of Jesus' early life and jumps on next to his baptism, nearly 30 years later. However, the journey to Egypt and the family's exile there for a time has something far more to say to us. Firstly, it reminds us of the whole theme in Scripture of the story of God's people. Abraham left his home country and settled in a land he believed God had given to him, the Promised Land. Then he too took his family to Egypt. Later, his descendant Joseph would be taken there as a slave, before redeeming his family in a time of famine. And then 400 years later, the people of Israel would leave in the epic story of the Exodus to settle again in the Promised Land. And then after the time of Isaiah, the northern kingdom would go into exile as the Assyrians overran the country. And then in 593 BC, the land of Judah and the city of Jerusalem would be overrun and many of the people taken into captivity in Babylon for 70 years. In the journey to Egypt, God kept Joseph and the family safe and let Jesus fully identified with the repeating story of God's people. It is a story of exile and return, a journey along the King's highway to the Promised Land. In Jesus, God is bringing his people back from exile to his land. Today, there are many thousands of people who are really experiencing exile. We'd probably call them refugees. People who've left their own countries voluntarily or involuntarily to find safety and hope in another place. We are all too familiar with the stories we hear on the news. Today, there are several thousand struggling to live and survive the freezing weather in the states of the old Yugoslavia, as well as in the camps around Calais. They're even prepared to risk crossing the Channel at this time of the year. In a small way, we could even see ourselves in a form of exile as our lives are rearranged and limited by the government during this pandemic. What Joseph found that is common to many in this situation is that he had a vision of a better future given to him by God. God spoke to him in a dream. He will and does speak to us if we're willing to hear him. It might be in a dream, it might not, but it could well be through what other people say, through prayers, and certainly through reading his word. And he will guide us forward to a new home, to a home in his promised land. Joseph's journey had started in Galilee from his hometown of Nazareth, when he took his family to Bethlehem for the census, and then on to Egypt and back to Nazareth. Though Matthew hints that Joseph's first ideas may not even have been to return to Nazareth. In these difficult days of the pandemic, we do well to remember how God's people have frequently found themselves on a difficult journey. But the way through it was by listening to God and trusting in his direction. It was in this way that Joseph was able to take his family safely home to Nazareth and God's promised land. Jesus would fulfill the scriptures. It's a wonderful picture for all of us, listening to God, following his call to enter his land, trusting him, and going as he calls and directs us. Jesus showed us the way in his own life. So as we consider this journey back from exile for Joseph, Mary and the baby Jesus, I wonder how ready we are to follow God's directions in these difficult days.